The knock on my car window came at 3:47 a.m. I know the exact time because I'd been staring at the dashboard clock for hours, trying to calculate how many more nights I could survive sleeping in my 2009 Toyota Camry before the cold killed me. December in Montana is no joke. Even with 2 blankets and every piece of clothing I owned layered on my body, I could see my breath fogging up the windshield. The flashlight beam hit my face like an accusation. "Sir, step out of the vehicle, please." I fumbled with the door handle, my fingers stiff and clumsy from the cold. When I finally got it open, I found myself face to face with a Billings police officer, young guy, maybe late 20s, with the kind of expression cops get when they're not sure if they're dealing with a drunk, a criminal, or just another piece of human wreckage that society had thrown away. License and registration. My name is Raymond Arthur Caldwell. I'm 45 years old, and 6 months ago I was a senior logistics manager at Northwest Distribution Services, making $94,000 a year with full benefits and a 401k that had just crossed the $200,000 mark. Now I was homeless, sleeping in a Walmart parking lot in Billings, Montana, with $47 to my name and nowhere left to go. I handed over my license with shaking hands, partly from the cold, partly from the humiliation of having a cop find me like this. He looked at it, looked at me, then walked back to his patrol car to run my information. I stood there in the freezing darkness, arms wrapped around myself, watching my breath crystallize in the air. This was it, the bottom, the absolute lowest point a man could reach, or so I thought. The officer was in his car for a long time, too long. I could see him through the windshield staring at his computer screen with an expression I couldn't read. Then he picked up his radio. That's when I started to worry. Running a license shouldn't take this long. Running a license shouldn't require a radio call, unless there was a warrant, but I didn't have any warrants. I'd never broken a law in my life. I was just a guy who'd lost everything and had nowhere else to sleep. The officer got out of his car. His whole demeanor had changed. He wasn't looking at me like a nuisance anymore. He was looking at me like I didn't know what, like I was something he'd never seen before. "Sir, I need you to stay right where you are." "Is there a problem, officer? I'm not doing anything illegal. I just needed somewhere to—" "I understand, sir. Just stay here. My captain is on his way." "Your captain? Why would—" "Please, sir, just wait." 15 minutes later, a second patrol car pulled into the Walmart lot. An older man stepped out, mid-50s, silver hair, the kind of weathered face that comes from decades of dealing with things most people never see. Captain, according to the insignia on his uniform. The 2 officers huddled together, speaking in low voices, glancing at me, periodically. The captain looked at whatever was on the younger officer's laptop screen. Even from 20 feet away, I could see his expression change. They both walked toward me. "Mr. Caldwell," the captain said. "I'm Captain Frank Moreno, Billings PD. I need to ask you some questions." "Am I under arrest?" "No, sir, nothing like that." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "When Officer Daniels ran your license, it triggered a federal flag in the system, a flag that's been active since 1991. 1991? I would have been 12 years old. I don't understand. What kind of flag? That's what we're trying to figure out." Captain Moreno's eyes were fixed on mine. "Sir, I need you to answer a question, and I need you to answer it truthfully. What is your mother's maiden name?" The question hit me like a physical blow. My mother, Elizabeth Caldwell, née Elizabeth Harmon, had been dead for 23 years, ovarian cancer. I'd held her hand in the hospital room when she passed, watched the light leave her eyes while my father sobbed in the corner. Why were they asking about her? "Harmon," I said slowly. "Elizabeth Harmon. Why?" Captain Moreno stared at me for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone and dialed a number. Someone answered on the second ring. Even in the freezing December air, even with my mind reeling from confusion and exhaustion, I could hear the voice on the other end. Loud, urgent. This is Captain Frank Moreno, Billings Police Department. I have a Raymond Arthur Caldwell here, date of birth August 14th, 1979. His mother's maiden name is Harmon. A pause. Yes, sir, I'm certain. The voice on the other end spoke for almost a full minute. I watched Captain Moreno's face as he listened. Watched his expression shift from professional curiosity to something else entirely. His hands started to shake. Understood, sir. We'll keep him here. Yes, sir, absolutely. He hung up the phone and looked at me, really looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time. Mr. Caldwell, he said, his voice slightly unsteady, is there somewhere warm we can take you? A diner, maybe? Somewhere you can get some coffee and wait. Wait for what? Captain Moreno exchanged a glance with Officer Daniels. Sir, I'm not at liberty to explain everything right now, but I can tell you this. There are people who've been looking for you for a very long time. Important people. He paused. And they're on their way here tonight. I stood there in the Walmart parking lot at 4 a.m., wearing every piece of clothing I owned, my life reduced to what could fit in the backseat of a rusting Toyota. And somehow, impossibly, everything was about to change. Let me tell you how a man goes from $94,000 a year to sleeping in his car in 6 months. It starts with love. It always does. I met Sandra Whitfield in 2015 at a friend's barbecue in Portland, Oregon. She was 34, I was 36. Both of us coming off failed relationships, both of us, convinced we'd never find anyone. She was beautiful. Not in the obvious way that makes men stupid, but in the warm, comfortable way that makes you think about growing old together. Brown hair with streaks of early gray she refused to dye, laugh lines around her eyes, a smile that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. We dated for 2 years, got married in 2017 at a small ceremony on the Oregon coast, just family and close friends, the way we both wanted it. For 4 years, I thought I had the perfect life. Sandra worked as an office manager at a mid-sized law firm in downtown Portland. I'd drop her off sometimes when her car was in the shop, walk her to the elevator, kiss her goodbye like a lovesick teenager. The firm was called Garrett and Associates. Personal injury, mostly. Ambulance chasers, but successful ones. The senior partner was a man named Mitchell Garrett. I should have seen it coming. The signs were there, same as they always are. Late nights that turned into later nights. New clothes, new perfume, new attention to her appearance. The way she'd angle her phone away from me when texts came in. But I trusted her. I loved her. And I was too busy building a life to notice that she was tearing it down behind my back. I found out in March 2024. Sandra had left her laptop open on the kitchen counter. She was in the shower, and I was looking for a recipe she'd bookmarked. Lamb chops, her favorite. I was going to surprise her with dinner. Instead, I found emails. Hundreds of them. Dating back 2 years. 2 years of, I can't stop thinking about you. 2 years of, last night was incredible. 2 years of, when are you going to leave him? Mitchell Garrett was 52 years old, divorced twice, and apparently sleeping with my wife in his corner office every Tuesday and Thursday while I was at work believing everything was fine. I confronted her that night. She didn't cry, didn't apologize, didn't even seem surprised that I'd found out. I want a divorce, she said, like she was ordering takeout. Mitchell and I have discussed it. He's going to represent me. You should find your own lawyer. Represent you? Sandra, he's the reason I've been happy for the first time in years. Her voice was cold, flat, like she was talking to a stranger. You were never here, Raymond. Always working, always tired, always somewhere else in your head. Mitchell actually sees me. I gave you everything. You gave me a comfortable prison. She picked up her phone, probably to text him. I've already talked to Mitchell about the division of assets, the house, the retirement accounts, everything. He says with Montana's equitable distribution laws, I'm entitled to at least 60%. Montana? We live in Oregon. She smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. Mitchell has a colleague in Billings who specializes in advantageous venue selection. Apparently, if we establish residency there before filing, the laws are much more favorable. She paused. To me. I should have fought, should have hired my own lawyer immediately, contested the venue, protected my assets. But I was in shock, complete, paralyzed shock. Sandra moved out the next day. 3 weeks later, I was served with divorce papers, filed in Yellowstone County, Montana, by a judge who turned out to be a golfing buddy of Mitchell's colleague. The divorce took 4 months. It felt like 4 years. Mitchell Garrett didn't just represent my wife. He dismantled my entire life with surgical precision. Every asset I'd accumulated over 2 decades of hard work was picked apart, analyzed, and redistributed. The house, which I'd made the down payment on with money I'd saved before we even met, was deemed marital property and sold, with Sandra receiving 65% of the proceeds. My 401k split down the middle, despite the fact that I'd been contributing to it for 15 years before we got married. My car, my savings, even the furniture my grandmother had left me. All of it gone. The final settlement left me with $12,000 and an old Toyota Camry that Sandra had deemed not worth fighting over. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was what Mitchell Garrett said to me outside the courthouse after the final hearing. He was wearing a $3,000 suit. I could tell because Sandra had shown me pictures of it, had bragged about how generous he was. His hair was silver and perfect. His smile was white and predatory, and his arm was around my wife like he'd won a trophy. "No hard feelings, Raymond," he said, extending his hand like we were business associates concluding a deal. "It's nothing personal, just how the system works." I didn't shake his hand. "You destroyed my life." "I optimized my client's outcome. There's a difference." Sandra laughed, actually laughed, that warm laugh I'd fallen in love with, now directed at my humiliation. "Face it, Raymond, you were never going to amount to anything. I just got out before you dragged me down with you." Mitchell pulled her closer. "We should go, sweetheart. Reservations at 7. They turned to leave. But Mitchell paused, looked back over his shoulder, and said the words that would echo in my head for the next 6 months. "Take care of yourself, Raymond. Although," he smirked, "with what you're left with, you'll probably die homeless." They walked away laughing. He was right, of course. About the homeless part, anyway. The $12,000 lasted 3 months. After the divorce was finalized in Montana, I had no reason to stay, no job, no home, no connections. I tried to go back to Portland, but Northwest Distribution had restructured my position while I was dealing with the divorce. 18 years of loyalty, gone with a form letter and 2 weeks of severance. I applied to other companies, dozens of them. But at 45, with a gap in my employment history and references that suddenly seemed reluctant to return calls. The interviews never turned into offers. The money ran out in October. By November, I was living in my car. By December, I was parked in a Walmart lot in Billings, Montana, the same city where my life had been legally dismantled, wondering if Mitchell Garrett's prediction was about to come true. And then a cop knocked on my window and asked about my mother, and everything I thought I knew about my life turned out to be wrong. Captain Moreno drove me to a 24-hour diner called Betty's on the edge of town. It was the kind of place that catered to truckers and insomniacs, plastic booths, coffee that had been sitting on the burner too long, a waitress named Donna who looked like she'd seen everything and was impressed by none of it. They sat me in a booth by the window and bought me breakfast. Eggs, bacon, toast, hash browns, the first hot meal I'd had in 3 days. I ate like an animal, too hungry to be embarrassed. Captain Moreno sat across from me, nursing his own coffee, watching me with an expression I couldn't read. "Mr. Caldwell," he finally said, "I've been a cop for 31 years. I've seen a lot of strange things, but I've never had a routine license check turn into a call with the U.S. Marshals Service." I stopped chewing. "Marshals? Why would the marshals? That's what they're coming to explain. He checked his watch. They should be here within the hour, flying in from Seattle. Flying? At 4 in the morning? Whatever's in your file, Mr. Caldwell. It's serious enough that someone woke up a federal marshal, got him on a plane, and sent him to a diner in Billings, Montana, in the middle of the night. Moreno leaned forward. Is there anything you want to tell me? Anything about your past that might explain this? I shook my head slowly. I don't have a past. I mean, nothing unusual. I grew up in Seattle. My dad was an electrician. My mom was a homemaker. They were good people, normal people. Mom died when I was 22. Cancer. Dad had a heart attack 5 years later. I've been on my own since then. No criminal record? Not even a parking ticket. Military service? I tried to enlist after high school. They rejected me. Heart murmur. Turned out to be nothing, but by then I'd already started working. Moreno frowned. And this federal flag has been active since 1991. You would have been 12. I was 12 years old in 1991. Any idea what a 12-year-old could have done to end up on a federal watch list? None. I was a normal kid. School, baseball, video games. Nothing that would attract federal attention. We sat in silence for a while. Donna refilled our coffees. Outside, the sky was starting to lighten, that gray pre-dawn that makes everything look tired and old. At 6:23 a.m., a black SUV pulled into the diner's parking lot. 2 men got out. Both were wearing suits, not expensive ones like Mitchell Garrett's, but the functional kind that government employees wear when they need to look official. One was older, maybe 60, with close-cropped gray hair and the build of a former military man. The other was younger, 30s, carrying a leather briefcase. They walked into the diner like they owned the place. The older one's eyes swept the room once, found me, and locked on. Raymond Caldwell? That's me. He slid into the booth beside Captain Moreno. The younger man took the seat next to me, boxing me in. I'm Deputy Marshal William Thornton. This is Deputy Marshal James Chen. He placed his credentials on the table, the gold star of the U.S. Marshals Service catching the diner's fluorescent light. Mr. Caldwell, what I'm about to tell you is going to sound unbelievable. I need you to listen carefully and save your questions until I'm finished. I nodded, my heart hammering against my ribs. In 1987, a man named Alexander Harmon founded a technology company called Harmon Defense Systems. Within 4 years, HDS was one of the largest defense contractors in the country. $2.3 billion in government contracts, cutting-edge weapons systems, classified projects at the highest levels. Harmon, my mother's maiden name. Alexander Harmon had a younger sister named Elizabeth. Elizabeth was considered the more brilliant of the 2 siblings, graduated MIT at 19, had offers from every major tech company in the world. But she chose a different path. She married a man named Arthur Caldwell, moved to Seattle, and had a son. My father's name was Arthur. I couldn't breathe. Elizabeth Harmon Caldwell was your mother, Mr. Caldwell, and Alexander Harmon, founder of a multi-billion-dollar defense empire, was your uncle. The words hit me like hammer blows. Uncle, empire, billions. That's impossible. My mother never mentioned. There's a reason for that. Thornton's voice was gentle but firm. In 1991, Alexander Harmon received credible death threats from foreign intelligence services who wanted access to his technology. The FBI and the Department of Defense made a decision. Alexander's entire extended family would be placed under protection, hidden. Any records linking them to Harmon would be sealed. But my parents never said anything. They weren't told the full truth. They were told it was a temporary precaution, that it would all blow over in a few years, but the threats never stopped. And then, in 1994, Alexander Harmon was killed in what was ruled a small plane accident. I remembered that year. I was 15. My mother had seemed different. Quieter, sadder. I'd asked her once if something was wrong, And she'd just hugged me and said sometimes life doesn't work out the way you planned. After Alexander's death, his estate went into a complex trust structure. No heirs were named publicly for their protection. The trust has been managed by a team of attorneys and financial advisors ever since, waiting. Waiting for what? Deputy Marshal Chen opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. He set it on the table between us. Waiting for you, Mr. Caldwell. Alexander Harmon's will was very specific. His fortune was to be held in trust until the threat assessment was downgraded, or until his only living blood relative, you, reached the age of 45 and could be safely located and verified. 45? I'd turned 45 4 months ago. The same month I lost everything. The trust was worth approximately $1.2 billion when Alexander died, Chen continued. Over the past 30 years, through careful management and compound growth, that number has increased significantly. He slid a single sheet of paper across the table. I looked at the number printed at the bottom. The diner started to spin. $4.7 billion, Mr. Caldwell. That's your inheritance. You are Alexander Harmon's sole heir, and as of your 45th birthday, the trust has been waiting for us to find you and complete the verification process. I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came out. $4.7 billion. I was sleeping in my car this morning. I had $47 to my name. I'd been told I would die homeless. And now 2 federal marshals were telling me I was one of the wealthiest people in America. There's one more thing, Thornton said. Your mother left something for you. A letter to be delivered only when you were verified as Alexander's heir. She wrote it before she died and asked that it be held in the trust documents. Chen pulled out an envelope. Yellowed with age, my mother's handwriting on the front. For Raymond, when the time comes. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold it. Take your time, Thornton said. We'll be here when you're ready. I opened the envelope and unfolded the letter inside. My dearest Raymond, if you're reading this, then the day I always feared has finally come, and somehow, against all odds, you've survived to see it. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for all the lies, for never telling you about your Uncle Alexander, about who your family really was, about the inheritance that was always meant to be yours. I wanted to tell you so many times, but I was afraid. Afraid that the same people who threatened Alexander would come for you. Your uncle was a brilliant man, but a lonely one. He never married, never had children. He used to say that you were the closest thing he'd ever have to a son. He visited once, when you were 3. You probably don't remember. He held you in his arms and cried. He said you were the future, the only part of his legacy that really mattered. I don't know what your life has been like. I don't know what struggles you've faced. But I know this. You are a Harmon. You come from people who built empires, who changed the world, who refused to accept the limits others placed on them. Whatever has happened to you, whatever you've lost, rise from it. Use what Alexander left you not for revenge, but for purpose. Build something, help people. Be the man I always knew you could be. I love you, Raymond. I have always loved you, and wherever I am now, I am proud of you. Your mother, Elizabeth, tears were streaming down my face. I didn't bother to wipe them away. My mother, the woman who'd held me when I had nightmares, who'd taught me to ride a bike, who'd died holding my hand in a hospital room. She'd been carrying this secret my entire life. She'd been protecting me. And now, finally, the protection was over. I looked up at the marshals, at Captain Moreno, at the diner that suddenly felt too small to contain what was happening. What happens now? Thornton almost smiled. Now, Mr. Caldwell, we take you to Seattle to meet the trustees. There's a lot of paperwork, a lot of verification, a lot of legal formalities. But essentially, he leaned back. Now you claim what's yours. I looked out the window at my rusting Toyota Camry, still parked in the lot across the street. 6 hours ago I was homeless. Now I was a billionaire. And somewhere in Portland, Mitchell Garrett was waking up next to my ex-wife, confident that he'd destroyed me completely. He had no idea what was coming. The next 6 weeks were a blur of lawyers, accountants, and documents. The trustees, a team of 7 attorneys and financial managers who'd been guarding my uncle's legacy for 3 decades, were headquartered in a glass tower in downtown Seattle. They'd been expecting me for years, apparently, had protocols in place, verification procedures, contingency plans. They were also, to my surprise, genuinely happy to see me. "Your uncle spoke about you often," said Margaret Chen, the lead trustee. No relation to Deputy Marshal Chen, just a coincidence. She was 73 years old, had been Alexander's personal attorney since the company's founding, and had the kind of sharp eyes that missed nothing. "He had a photograph of you on his desk, the last one your mother sent him when you were about 10. I don't remember ever meeting him. You were very young, but he remembered you." She smiled. "He used to say you had his sister's eyes, Elizabeth's eyes." The verification process was extensive. DNA tests, document authentication, interviews with people who'd known my mother decades ago. The Marshal's Service was involved, along with the FBI and several agencies whose names I wasn't allowed to know. But eventually, after 6 weeks of bureaucracy and background checks and signatures on documents I barely understood, it was official. I was Raymond Arthur Harmon Caldwell, legal heir to Alexander Harmon's estate, and I was worth $4.7 billion. The money was staggering. Not just the number, but what it represented. Harmon Defense Systems had been sold in 2001, but the proceeds had been invested in everything from tech startups to commercial real estate. I owned shares in companies I'd never heard of, properties in cities I'd never visited, accounts in banks that didn't advertise to normal people, but I didn't care about any of that. Not really. What I cared about was what the money could do. "I want to understand everything," I told Margaret during one of our early meetings. "Every company, every investment, every asset. I'm not going to be a passive owner." "That will take years, Mr. Caldwell." "I have years. What I don't have is ignorance." I leaned forward. "My uncle built this. My mother protected it. I'm not going to waste it." Margaret studied me for a long moment. Then she smiled. The first real smile I'd seen from her. "You really are Elizabeth's son." I threw myself into learning. 18-hour days, studying financial reports and company histories, meeting with executives and portfolio managers, understanding for the first time the world I'd inherited. But even as I built my new life, I never forgot the old one. I never forgot Mitchell Garrett's smirk. I never forgot Sandra's laugh. I never forgot the words, "You'll probably die homeless." Some people would call what I was planning revenge. Maybe they'd be right. But I preferred to think of it as justice, the kind of justice that the legal system had failed to provide, the kind that only money and patience could deliver. I started with research. Mitchell Garrett wasn't just a personal injury lawyer. He was the senior partner at Garrett & Associates, a firm that had grown suspiciously fast over the past decade. His client list was impressive. Major settlements, big payouts, the kind of wins that made other lawyers jealous. Too many wins, actually. I hired a team of investigators, former FBI, former SEC, the kind of people who know where to look and what to look for. Their job was simple: find out how Mitchell Garrett really operated. What they found was worse than I expected. Garrett & Associates wasn't just aggressive. It was corrupt. Insurance fraud, witness tampering, bribed medical examiners who inflated injury reports, a network of doctors willing to provide false diagnoses for a cut of the settlement. Mitchell Garrett had built his empire on lies, and he'd gotten so confident, so arrogant, that he'd stopped being careful. "The evidence is solid," my lead investigator told me after 3 months of work. "We have documents, recordings, testimony from former employees. If this goes to the right authorities, Garrett is finished. Disbarment, criminal charges, prison time. What about Sandra? She's involved, but peripherally. She's been handling some of the administrative side, filing false claims, coordinating with the network, enough to charge her with conspiracy, probably, but she's not the mastermind. I thought about that for a long time. Sandra had betrayed me, had laughed while Mitchell destroyed my life, had walked away with everything I'd built while I slept in my car. But she wasn't evil, not really. She was weak, greedy, easily manipulated by a predator who knew how to exploit her insecurities. Did she deserve prison? Maybe. Did I want to be the one who put her there? I wasn't sure. Hold on to everything, I finally told the investigator. But don't move yet. There's something I want to do first. What's that? I want to look him in the eye. I want Mitchell Garrett to see exactly who I've become before his world falls apart. The investigator raised an eyebrow. That's a risk. If he knows someone's coming for him, he won't run. Men like Mitchell don't run. They're too arrogant to believe anyone can touch them. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the Seattle skyline. Set up a meeting, something he can't refuse, something that will bring him right to me. And then I'm going to give him exactly what he deserves. The Harmon Foundation's annual philanthropy gala was held in March at the Seattle Grand Hyatt. 300 guests. Tech executives, politicians, old money families who'd been donating to worthy causes since before I was born. And one very special invitee. The invitation had gone out on embossed cardstock, hand-delivered by courier to the offices of Garrett and Associates in Portland. The Harmon Foundation cordially invites Mitchell Garrett, escorned, to attend our annual philanthropy gala as a potential partner in our criminal justice reform initiative. Criminal justice reform. The irony wasn't lost on me. Mitchell accepted within 24 hours. Of course he did. The Harmon Foundation was one of the largest charitable organizations on the West Coast. An invitation like this meant access to donors, to connections, to the kind of people Mitchell had spent his whole career trying to impress. He had no idea he was walking into a trap. I watched from across the ballroom as he arrived. He was wearing an even more expensive suit than the one I remembered from the courthouse. $5,000 at least, perfectly tailored. Sandra was on his arm, radiant in a red gown that probably cost more than my monthly salary used to be. They looked happy, looked confident, like they owned the world. Mitchell worked the room like a professional, shaking hands, making small talk, collecting business cards. He was good at it, I had to admit. Charming, in a reptilian way. The kind of man who could make you feel like the most important person in the room while he was calculating how to use you. I waited until he was alone. Sandra had gone to the bathroom, leaving him momentarily unattended. Then I walked over. "Mr. Garrett," he turned, his professional smile already in place. "Yes, I don't believe we've—" He stopped, the color drained from his face. "Raymond?" "In the flesh." I extended my hand, although I go by Raymond Harmon Caldwell now. Family name, you understand. He didn't shake my hand. He just stared at me, at my tailored Brioni suit, my platinum cufflinks, the quiet confidence of a man who no longer had anything to prove. How is this possible? You were homeless, sleeping in my car. You predicted I'd die that way, if I remember correctly. I don't understand. The Harmon Foundation. You're connected to... I don't just connect to the Harmon Foundation, Mitchell. I am the Harmon Foundation. I let that sink in. My uncle was Alexander Harmon. Perhaps you've heard of him? Defense contractor, built a $2 billion empire from nothing. He left everything to me. Mitchell's mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. Funny how things work out, isn't it? 6 months ago you told me I was nothing, that I'd never amount to anything, that I'd die in a gutter somewhere. I smiled. And now, here we are, at my gala, in my ballroom, surrounded by my guests. "Raymond, listen." He was sweating now, his composure cracking. "Whatever happened between us, it was just business. You understand that, right? Nothing personal. You took everything from me. My wife, my savings, my home. You left me with nothing and laughed while you did it. My voice was calm, almost pleasant. That felt pretty. Personal to me. Sandra appeared at his shoulder, her smile fading as she recognized me. Raymond, what, how? Hello, Sandra. You look well. Enjoying the party? She grabbed Mitchell's arm, her nails digging into his sleeve. Mitchell, what's going on? Why is he here? Why does he look like someone who matters? I finished. Interesting question. Maybe you should have asked yourself that before you helped him destroy my life. I pulled out my phone and checked the time. Ah, right on schedule. Schedule? What schedule? The ballroom's main doors opened. 4 men walked in, 2 in the dark suits of federal agents, 2 in the uniforms of U.S. Marshals. The same U.S. Marshals who'd found me in that Walmart parking lot 5 months ago. Mitchell Garrett? The lead agent approached with credentials displayed. FBI, you're under arrest for insurance fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy to commit witness tampering. You have the right to remain silent. Mitchell tried to run. He made it about 3 steps before a marshal caught him and put him on the ground. The ballroom erupted, gasps, shouts, phones coming out to record. 300 of Seattle's elite watching Mitchell Garrett get handcuffed on the polished floor. Sandra Garrett? A second agent approached my ex-wife, who was standing frozen in shock. You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit insurance fraud. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you. No, Sandra screamed, twisting away. I didn't do anything. It was all Mitchell. I just did what he told me. That's not what your email records indicate, ma'am. They cuffed her anyway. Gently, professionally, but firmly. As they led her past me, Sandra's eyes met mine. Mascara was running down her cheeks. Her perfect gown was disheveled. She looked exactly the way I'd felt that day outside the courthouse. Destroyed, humiliated, helpless. Raymond, she whispered, please. I'm sorry. I never meant. You laughed, I said quietly. When he told me I'd die homeless, you laughed. She had nothing to say to that. The agents led them both out. The ballroom was chaos. Reporters who'd been invited to cover the gala now had the story of the year. Mitchell Garrett, prominent Portland attorney, arrested for federal crimes at a charity event hosted by a mysterious billionaire. A billionaire who turned out to be his former victim. Deputy Marshal Thornton appeared at my elbow. That was dramatic. You told me 5 months ago that I'd claim what was mine. I did. I meant the money. The money was just the beginning. I watched the door close behind Mitchell and Sandra. Justice, that's what I was really claiming. Thornton studied me for a moment. Your uncle would have approved. He was a man who believed in consequences. So am I. The gala continued eventually. People are resilient. Free champagne helps. By midnight, the arrests were just a story people were telling each other, another scandal to gossip about over cocktails. But I didn't stay to celebrate. I went back to my hotel room, sat by the window, and watched the Seattle lights glitter against the darkness. Mitchell Garrett was going to prison. Sandra would probably get probation, maybe a few months of minimum security. She was small fish, and she'd cooperate. Their lives were over. Everything they'd built on lies and cruelty was dust. And me? I was just getting started. Mitchell Garrett was convicted 8 months later. The trial was a media circus. Prominent attorney revealed as career criminal, brought down by the homeless man he'd mocked and robbed. Every news outlet in the Pacific Northwest covered it. Court TV ran daily segments. True crime podcasts were already planning episodes. The evidence was overwhelming. My investigators had done their job well, and once the FBI started digging, they found even more than we'd uncovered. Mitchell had been running his scheme for almost 15 years, defrauding insurance companies out of tens of millions of dollars. The judge gave him 22 years. I was in the gallery when the sentence came down. Mitchell looked at me once, just before they led him away. His eyes were empty. No arrogance left, no charm, nothing but the hollow stare of a man who'd finally run out of plays. I didn't say anything, didn't gloat, just watched him disappear through the door that led to the rest of his life. 22 years. He'd be 74 when he got out if he made it that long. Somehow, I doubted he would. Sandra took a plea deal, 2 years of probation, 200 hours of community service, full cooperation with prosecutors. She lost everything, of course. The house Mitchell had bought her, the cars, the jewelry. She was living in a studio apartment in a bad part of Portland, working as a receptionist at a dental office. Part of me felt sorry for her. A small part. Then I remembered her laugh outside, that courthouse, and the pity faded. I heard through mutual acquaintances that she tried to reach out to me once, sent a letter through my lawyers, apologizing, explaining, asking if there was any chance we could talk. I didn't respond. Some doors, once closed, should stay closed. The Harmon Foundation grew under my leadership. We expanded into education, funding scholarships for first-generation college students. We built community centers in underserved neighborhoods. We created programs to help people who'd been wrongly convicted, who'd lost everything through no fault of their own, who just needed someone to give them a chance. I knew what it felt like to have nothing. I wanted to make sure fewer people had to feel that way. Captain Frank Moreno came to visit me once, about a year after everything happened. He was retiring from the Billings PD, 32 years of service, finally ready to hang up his badge. We had dinner at a steakhouse in Seattle. My treat. "I still think about that night," he said over his ribeye. "Finding you in that parking lot, thinking you were just another homeless guy having a rough time." I was a homeless guy having a rough time. Yeah, but you were also a billionaire. You just didn't know it yet. He shook his head. "Life's strange. That's one word for it. You know what I remember most? When I asked about your mother's maiden name, you answered without hesitation. No suspicion, no fear, just trust. I had nothing left to hide, nothing left to lose." "That's exactly it." Moreno pointed his fork at me. "Most people, when they hit rock bottom, they close off. They get defensive, suspicious, angry. But you stayed open. That's why everything worked out." I thought about that for a long time after he left. He was right, in a way. The worst moment of my life, that freezing night in a Walmart parking lot, cops knocking on my window, no idea what was coming, had been the moment everything changed, not because of the money. The money was just an accident of birth, a lottery ticket I didn't know I was holding. What changed was me. I stopped fighting against what had happened and started moving through it. Stopped asking, why me, and started asking, what now? And somehow, impossibly, that had made all the difference. I still have my old Toyota Camry. It's in the garage of my house in Seattle. A modest place on Queen Anne Hill, nothing like what you'd expect from a billionaire. I could have bought a mansion, a yacht, a private island. Instead, I bought the kind of house I'd always wanted. 3 bedrooms, a garden, a neighborhood where people wave when they walk past. The Camry is rusted and dented and probably not worth the cost of the insurance, but I keep it anyway. It reminds me of who I was before all this, who I still am, underneath the money and the foundation and the new name. A guy who lost everything. A guy who survived anyway. A guy who learned that your life can change completely in a single moment, for worse or for better, and the only thing you can control is how you respond. Last week, I was going through some old papers when I found the divorce settlement, the document that took everything from me, signed by a corrupt judge in a rigged court. I held it for a long moment. Then I put it in a frame and hung it in my office, right where I can see it every day, not as a reminder of what Mitchell Garrett did to me, as a reminder that the worst days of your life don't have to be the end of your story. Sometimes they're just the beginning. People ask me sometimes if I believe in fate. I think about my Uncle Alexander hiding his fortune for decades to protect a nephew he barely knew. I think about my mother, carrying her secret to the grave, trusting that somehow I'd find my way to the truth. I think about that cop who ran my license at 3 a.m. in a random parking lot, triggering a flag that had been waiting 33 years to be triggered. What are the odds? 1,000,000 to 1, 1,000,000,000 to 1? I don't know if that's fate or luck or something else entirely. What I know is this: I didn't give up. Even when I was sleeping in my car, even when I had $47 to my name, even when the man who destroyed my life told me I'd die homeless, I kept going. Not because I knew something better was coming, because stopping wasn't an option. So here's what I want to ask you. Have you ever had someone tell you that you'd never amount to anything? That you were worthless? That you'd fail? That you might as well give up? What did you do? Did you believe them? Or did you keep going anyway? Tell me your story in the comments. I read every single one. And if you know someone who's going through the worst time of their life right now, someone who feels like everything is lost, like there's no way forward, share this with them. Because the truth is, none of us know what's waiting on the other side of our darkest nights. Mine was a $4.7 billion inheritance and the chance to rebuild everything. Yours might be something else entirely, but you'll never find out if you stop, so don't stop. Keep going, and wait for the knock on your window.